Marxist theory presents a complex and nuanced interpretation of the progression of socioeconomic systems. This progression is understood as a dialectical process, one driven by the development of productive forces such as technology, labor skills, and methods of organization, and the consequent transformation of relations of production, the class relations and ownership structures within a society. Each stage in this production, from primitive communism to slavery to feudalism to capitalism to socialism and eventually to communism, is marked by specific characteristics and internal contradictions. These contradictions create tensions within each system, leading to its eventual overhaul and the emergence of a new, more advanced system. Contrary to a common misconception, Marx's framework is not strictly predictive or deterministic. Rather, it offers a theoretical model for understanding the historical dynamics of socioeconomic change. Marx's dialectical approach involves observing patterns in the development of human societies and extrapolating these patterns to form a broader theory of socioeconomic evolution. He identifies key tensions and contradictions within each socioeconomic system, particularly those related to the relations of production, and explores how these tensions might catalyze the transition to a new system. The transitions between systems in Marx's model are not automatic or strictly linear. For instance, the transition to socialism is seen as a potential rather than an inevitable outcome of the contradictions inherent in capitalism, such as the exploitation of the working class and cyclical economic crises. This transition, along with others in Marx's model, depends significantly on human agency, particularly on class consciousness and the capacity to organize and challenge the existing order. Marx's theory, therefore, is both descriptive and prescriptive. It describes the historical conditions that make certain socioeconomic changes logical and necessary, such as the shift from capitalism to socialism in response to capitalist contradictions. However, it also acknowledges the crucial role of human action in realizing these changes. The absence of a universal transition to socialism or the emergence of forms different from what Marx envisioned does not necessarily negate his theory. Instead, it highlights the intricate interplay of economic, political, social, and ideological factors in historical development. Furthermore, Marx's work serves as both a critique of capitalist systems and a call to action. His analysis aims to expose the exploitative nature of capitalism and to illustrate the potential for more efficient and rational forms of socioeconomic organization. The transitions in Marx's theoretical model represent logical developments arising from each system's internal contradictions. They're contingent on the actions of the working class and the specific socioeconomic conditions of the time. The progression from capitalism to socialism and ultimately to communism is thus presented as a possibility shaped by both material conditions and human agency, rather than as an inevitable or predetermined outcome. We turn now to an explanation of each socioeconomic system, starting with primitive communism and moving to slavery, then feudalism, and then capitalism, and then socialism, and ultimately to communism, explaining the nature of each system and, more importantly, how the development of productive forces within each system leads to internal contradictions within that system that set the stage for the coming into existence of the next system in the progression. In the earliest stage of socioeconomic development, known as primitive communism, societies were organized around shared resources and collective labor. The productive forces were rudimentary, primarily involving hunting, gathering, and simple agriculture. There was minimal division of labor and no concept of private property in the means of production. Social relations were based on kinship and communal living, with resources distributed according to need. As productive forces developed, particularly with advancements in agriculture and the creation of surplus, primitive communist societies faced new challenges. The ability to produce surplus led to the accumulation of wealth and the emergence of social hierarchies. Surplus production created the need for labor management and the allocation of surplus, which primitive communism's egalitarian structures were ill-equipped to handle. This surplus also made conquest more rewarding, leading to the capture and enslavement of other communities. The rise of private property alongside these changes catalyzed the transition from communal ownership to a society divided into classes: slave owners and slaves. In slave societies, the means of production were owned by a class of slave owners, while the direct producers were the slaves, who had no rights and were considered property. The primary productive force was slave labor, and the relations of production were based on direct coercion. Slavery allowed for greater accumulation and centralization of wealth and resources, but it had inherent limitations. The system relied heavily on conquest for new slaves and was marked by inefficiencies, since coerced labor is less productive and innovative than free labor. Moreover, the constant threat of slave revolts posed a stability risk. The inefficiencies and instabilities of slavery, combined with external pressures such as invasions and economic shifts, led to the decline of slave societies. As the Roman Empire collapsed, for instance, Europe saw the rise of feudalism. The transition was marked by the decentralization of power and the fragmentation of land ownership. The rigid slave-owner relation proved inadequate for managing increased complex agricultural production and trade. Feudalism emerged as a system more suited to these evolving productive forces, introducing a new set of social relations based on land ownership and vassalage. Feudalism was characterized by a division between the nobility, the landowners, and serfs, who were peasants who worked the land. Unlike slaves, serfs were tied to the land but were not personal property. The main productive force was agricultural labor, and the relations of production were defined by obligations and rights. Serfs worked the land and paid rent, either in kind or in labor, to the lords, who provided protection and governance. This system allowed for more stable and sustainable agricultural production, but was limited by its lack of flexibility and innovation. The limitations of feudalism became apparent as productive forces continued to develop. The growth of trade, the emergence of towns and cities, and advancements in technology, like the printing press and improved agricultural techniques, created new social dynamics. A new class of merchants and artisans, the bourgeoisie, began to gain wealth and influence. The rigid feudal structure, with its constraints on trade and mobility, became a barrier to economic growth and innovation. The rise of the bourgeoisie, alongside peasant revolts and the weakening of feudal lords, paved the way for the emergence of capitalism. Capitalism is marked by private ownership of the means of production and the creation of goods and services for profit. The primary classes are the bourgeoisie, who own the means of production, and the proletariat, who sell their labor. The productive forces include advanced technology, industrialization, and a global market. Relations of production are based on wage labor and the market mechanism. While capitalism greatly increases productive capacity and efficiency, it also leads to significant contradictions, such as the concentration of wealth, cyclical crises, and the alienation of workers. The inherent contradictions of capitalism, particularly class struggle and periodic crises like recessions, create conditions ripe for revolutionary change. Marx theorized that the proletariat, becoming aware of their exploitation, would unite and overthrow the bourgeoisie. This transition to socialism involves seizing control of the state and the means of production, redistributing wealth, and reorganizing society to eliminate class distinctions. This process aims to resolve the contradictions of capitalism by removing the profit motive and introducing planned, collective ownership of production. In a socialist society, the means of production are owned collectively, and production is organized to meet the needs of society rather than for profit. The goal is to create a classless society where wealth and power are distributed more equitably. Socialism is seen as a transitional phase between capitalism and communism, where the state still exists but is used to progressively dismantle the vestiges of capitalist relations and to foster egalitarian social relations. The transition from socialism to communism occurs as advanced productive forces under socialism create material abundance, eliminating the need for state structures. This abundance, combined with the eradication of class distinctions, makes the state's role in resource distribution and management obsolete. As society organically adapts to communal ownership and democratic control of production, the state withers away, leading to a classless, stateless society. Communism emerges naturally from this maturation of socialist principles, where production and distribution are based on communal needs and abilities. The final stage, communism, is envisioned as a stateless, classless society where the means of production are communally owned. Production is based on the principle from each according to their ability to each according to their needs. Communism represents the culmination of the dialectical process, resolving the contradictions of previous systems and creating a society free from class divisions and exploitation. Each transition in this progression is driven by the development of productive forces and the resulting tensions within the existing relations of production. As each system grows increasingly incapable of accommodating new productive forces, it gives way to a new system that can better harness these forces for socioeconomic development. This dialectical process reflects the Marxist view of history as a dynamic and evolving narrative driven by material conditions and class struggle.